My sister smiled while stealing my name, my degree, my entire life, in front of thousands of people. And I stood there, in the crowd, holding an envelope that could erase her existence. The applause was deafening. Caps in the air, parents crying, cameras flashing. And on that stage, wearing my gown, walking with my name being called, was my twin sister, Alina. Same face, same voice, same everything. Except one thing. She had no right to be there. And I, the one who had spent 4 years breaking myself to earn that moment, was standing behind a pillar like a stranger at my own life. I didn't scream, didn't run, didn't expose her. Because reactions are for people who lose control. And I had already decided I wasn't going to lose. Not today. Not ever again. The dean smiled as she took my certificate. The crowd cheered louder. My parents stood up, clapping for her. That part didn't hurt the way you think it would. Because pain is loud, sharp, immediate. What I felt was something quieter, something colder. Recognition. This wasn't sudden. This wasn't a mistake. This was planned. And I had been blind long enough. The first time I realized something was wrong was 3 weeks before graduation. My login stopped working. My thesis file disappeared from the university portal. When I reported it, they told me something that didn't make sense. Your submission is already complete. Complete. Under my name. With my ID. But not by me. I remember walking out of that office, feeling like I had just stepped out of my own body. Because deep down, I already knew. There was only one person who could do that. Only one person who had access to everything I had. Alina. My sister. My mirror. My shadow. The one who had spent her entire life quietly competing with me. Not openly. Not aggressively. Just subtly replacing me. Taking my clothes. Answering my calls. Showing up as me when it benefited her. And every time I called it out, my parents would laugh. You're twins, it's normal. Normal. That word became her shield. And my silence became her weapon. So when I walked into the registrar's office the next day, I didn't accuse her. I didn't panic. Asked for records. Calmly. And that's when I saw it. Every assignment, every submission, every signature, all under my name. But timestamps, locations, IP logs, they didn't match me. They matched her. I should have gone straight to the administration, exposed everything. But I didn't. Because something inside me finally clicked. If she was bold enough to steal my entire identity at this level, then this wasn't just about jealousy. This was about something deeper. Something bigger. And I needed to know what. So, I did something no one expected. I disappeared. Not dramatically. Not suspiciously. Just quietly. I stopped going home. Stopped answering calls. And I watched. From a distance. And what I saw was disturbing. She didn't look stressed. Didn't look afraid of being caught. She looked comfortable. Like she had been waiting for this moment her whole life. My parents didn't question it either. In fact, they adjusted. Effortlessly. Calling her by my name. Posting about my achievements. Proud. Happy. That's when the second truth hit me. This wasn't just her plan. This was a family decision. And I was the extra piece. the one they didn't need anymore. So I went deeper. I accessed things I was never supposed to see. Old documents, medical files, locked records. And that's when I found it. A file, hidden, buried, not under my name, under hers. And inside was a DNA report. At first, it didn't make sense. The numbers, the markers. But one line, one small clinical sentence changed everything. Subject shows no biological relation to listed parents. I read it again, and again, and again. No relation, meaning Alina wasn't their daughter, which meant one of us didn't belong. And suddenly, everything started to make sense. Her obsession, her entitlement, the way my parents always protected her, even when she crossed lines no one else could. Because she wasn't just their child. She was something they were hiding, something they were protecting. And I was the only threat to that lie. That's when I stopped being emotional and started becoming strategic. I didn't confront them, didn't reveal what I found. I let the plan continue. Let her walk into my life completely. Let her take the stage. Because the higher she climbed, the harder she would fall. And now, standing in that graduation crowd, watching her smile for cameras, holding my future in her hands, I finally understood something. Revenge isn't about anger. It's about timing. The ceremony was ending, names finishing, people standing up. And then came the announcement. Valedictorian speech. My speech. She stepped forward, confident, perfect, holding the paper I had written. Every word, mine. She adjusted the mic, smiled, and began. Today is not just a celebration of success. Her voice didn't shake, not even once. She had practiced this, lived this. And for a moment, just a brief second, I almost admired her. The audacity. But then, I remembered the file in my hand. The truth she didn't know I had. And I smiled. Because she thought she had won. She had no idea this was exactly where I wanted her. The speech ended. Standing ovation. My parents were crying. She stepped down, glowing, victorious. And that's when I moved. Not rushing, not dramatic, just walking forward. Through the crowd, through the noise, until I reached the front. Our eyes met. For a second, just 1 second, her smile flickered. Because something in my face was different. Not hurt, not anger. Something else. Control. I stepped onto the stage. No invitation. No permission. Just presence. The crowd quieted. Confused. Curious. I stood beside her. Close enough that only she could hear me. You forgot one thing, I whispered. Her fingers tightened around the certificate. What? She asked softly. I looked at her, calm, unshaken. You stole my name. Pause. But you never checked your own. And before she could react, I turned toward the microphone, reached into my bag, and pulled out the envelope. The same one I had been holding since the moment I decided she would lose everything. The crowd leaned in, and I smiled, because in the next few seconds, I wasn't just going to take back my life. I was going to erase hers. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't rush, because chaos only helps the guilty. And I wanted every single eye, focused. I unfolded the paper slowly, let the sound of it echo into the microphone. That tiny sound cut through the crowd harder than any scream. Before everyone leaves, I said softly, there's something important you should know. A ripple of confusion. Phones lifted again. People turning back to their seats. Perfect. Beside me, Alina shifted slightly, not panicking yet, but alert. Good. She should be. My parents stood up halfway. My mother's smile frozen. My father already walking toward the stage. Too late. I've been quiet for a long time, I continued. About things that didn't make sense. Pause. About things that were hidden from me. I didn't look at them. Not yet. Because this wasn't about emotion. This was about control. Alina leaned closer, her voice low, sharp. What are you doing? I didn't answer her. Instead, I lifted the paper slightly. This, I said, is a medical report. The word medical did something. It made people lean in, made it serious, credible. I found it by accident, I continued, hidden in files that weren't meant for me. My father was on the stairs now, my mother right behind him, still smiling, still pretending. They thought they could manage this. Spin it. Silence it. They didn't know I had already accounted for that. I didn't understand it at first, I said. The numbers, the codes. Pause. But one line was very clear. Now I looked at Alina, straight into her eyes, and for the first time, I saw it. Not confidence, not control, fear. Just a flicker, but enough. I turned back to the crowd. It said, I spoke slowly, that the subject has no biological relation to the listed parents. Silence. Complete. Heavy. Like the entire air shifted. Someone laughed nervously, thinking it was a joke. It wasn't. My father reached me, grabbed my arm. Talia, stop this right now. His voice was low, controlled, but his fingers, tight. I gently pulled my arm away. No, I said calmly, not this time. And then I did something he wasn't ready for. I handed the paper to the dean, not to him, not to my mother, to someone neutral, someone with authority. Please read the highlighted part, I said softly. The dean hesitated, looked at my parents, then at the crowd, then at me, and something in my expression made him choose. He adjusted his glasses, looked down, and read, out loud, exactly what I had said, word for word. No emotion, just fact. Gasps, whispers, phones rising higher. Because now, it wasn't a family issue. It was public, permanent. Alina stepped back. No, she whispered. But it wasn't denial. It was confusion. Real confusion. She looked at my parents, searching, demanding. What is this? She asked. My mother moved quickly. Too quickly. It's wrong, she said instantly. Old report inaccurate. Her voice was shaking. That was her mistake. Because lies should never shake. I tilted my head slightly. Then let's verify it, I said. Simple. Deadly. The crowd reacted instantly, murmurs growing louder. Because now, it wasn't just an accusation. It was a challenge. My father stepped in front of me, blocking me from the mic. This is not the place for this, he snapped. I smiled. You're right, I said softly. It's not. Then I leaned closer, just enough for him to hear. That's why I made copies. His expression changed. Not anger, not even fear. Calculation. He looked around and saw it. Phones, cameras, recording, streaming. Too many. Too late. Alina's breathing got heavier. Mom.
Dad, she said.
Say something. But they didn't. Because for the first time, they didn't have control. And that's when the shift happened. Not outside. Inside her. She turned slowly, looked at me. You knew, she asked. Her voice was different now. Not arrogant. Not confident. Just raw. I held her gaze. I know everything, I said quietly. That wasn't entirely true. But truth isn't always about facts. It's about impact. And it hit. Hard. Her knees almost gave out. Because in that moment, her entire identity started collapsing. But I wasn't done. Not even close. Because exposing the truth was only the first layer. I stepped back toward the microphone. And there's one more thing, I said. The room froze again. Because they felt it. The next blow. Stronger. More dangerous. My parents reacted instantly. No, my mother whispered. That one word told me everything. I smiled. Because this was the part they feared. I reached into my bag again and pulled out something smaller. Thinner. A second document. But this one wasn't old. It was recent. Fresh. Signed. Verified. Alina stared at it. Her lips parted slightly. What is that? She whispered. I didn't answer. I looked at the crowd. At the cameras. At the people who would carry this moment far beyond this stage. And then I spoke. This one, pause, was done 2 weeks ago. The reaction was instant. Because now there was no excuse. No old report. No mistake. Just truth. Alive. Current. Undeniable. My father stepped forward again. Desperate now. Talia, don't. I looked at him. Really looked at him. For the first time, not as a daughter, but as someone who finally saw him clearly. You should have thought about that, I said softly, before you erased me. And then I handed the second document to Alina. Not the dean. Not the crowd. Her. Because some truths are more powerful when they're read in silence. Her hands trembled as she took it. Her eyes scanned the page, line by line. And then everything in her face broke. Completely. Tears. Shock. And something else. Something darker. Something that made my stomach tighten for the first time that day. She looked up at me. Not confused anymore. Not broken. Aware. You, she whispered. A pause. Heavy. What did you do? The crowd leaned in, waiting. But I didn't answer. Because I realized something in that exact moment. Something I hadn't expected. The truth I revealed wasn't just destroying her. It was waking her up. And the way she was looking at me now wasn't like a victim. It was like someone who had just remembered something dangerous. Something I wasn't prepared for. And suddenly, for the first time, I wasn't completely in control anymore. Her eyes didn't look lost anymore. They looked focused. That terrified me more than anything, because confusion is predictable, pain is manageable, but clarity, especially sudden clarity, is dangerous. She lowered the paper slowly. Her fingers stopped shaking. Too fast. Way too fast. "What did you do?" she asked again. But this time, her voice was steady, controlled, almost like mine. The crowd was still whispering, still recording, still waiting for the collapse. But something had shifted, and I felt it. A quiet, creeping realization that maybe, just maybe, I hadn't uncovered everything. I stepped closer, keeping my expression calm. "I told the truth," I said. She let out a soft breath, almost like a laugh. "No," she murmured, "you told the truth." That sentence slid under my skin, because it was precise, intentional, and worst of all, it sounded like something I would say. She looked down at the document again, then back at me. "You really think this makes you the victim?" she asked quietly. I didn't respond. Not yet. Because this wasn't about answering. This was about watching. Letting her reveal herself. She turned slowly toward the microphone. And before anyone could stop her, she stepped forward. The crowd hushed instantly. Because now, they had two versions. And humans love conflict. She adjusted the mic, took a breath, then smiled. Not the fake smile from before. Something sharper. "Hi," she said softly. "I guess this isn't how my speech was supposed to end." A few nervous laughs. She glanced at the paper in her hand, then back at the crowd. "My sister is right about one thing," she continued. "I'm not biologically related to our parents."
Gasps again.
But this time, they didn't belong to me.
Because she said it so easily.
Like she had already accepted it. Or worse, like she already knew. I felt something tighten in my chest. She turned her head slightly, looking at me from the corner of her eye. "But what she didn't tell you," she added, "is why." And just like that, the room tilted again. My parents froze. Completely. My mother's face lost all color. My father didn't move at all. That stillness said more than panic ever could. I stepped forward instinctively. "Alina," I said quietly. A warning. But she ignored it.
Of course she did.
Because now, she had something. And she was going to use it. She found a DNA report. Alina continued.
Hidden. Secret.
Shocking. She nodded slowly. But secrets don't exist in isolation. She lifted the document slightly. They exist because something worse is being protected. The crowd leaned in again. Phone steady. Eyes locked. And I realized I had just given her a stage. A perfect stage. She turned fully toward me now. "You really want the truth?" she asked. There was no anger in her voice. No emotion at all. That was worse. Because emotion can be controlled. This was intention. I didn't answer. Because for the first time, I wasn't sure what she would say. And that uncertainty felt like slipping. She faced the audience again. "When I was 8 years old," she began, "I got sick." My mother let out a sharp breath. "No," she whispered. But Alina kept going.
Really sick, she said.
Doctors couldn't figure it out at first.
Pause.
Until they realized I needed a transplant. The room went completely still. Because now, this wasn't just drama. This was something else. Something heavier. Bone marrow, she said. I felt my heartbeat change. Slow. Heavy. Because I remembered that.
Barely.
Fragments. Hospitals. Needles. My parents whispering. But I had been told it was nothing.
Routine.
A childhood illness. They tested our parents, she continued. Neither was a match. Her voice didn't break. Not once. So they had a choice. She turned to look at me again. And this time, there was something in her eyes. Not anger. Not revenge. Something colder. They could let me die, she said softly, or they could create a match. The words didn't hit immediately. They didn't need to, because the meaning was already forming.
Slowly. Horribly.
My throat went dry. No, I whispered. But she heard it.
Of course she did.
They chose the second option, she said. And then she smiled. That small, terrifying smile. You. The world didn't explode. It didn't shatter. It just
stopped.
Because suddenly, everything made sense. The timing. The way I was always needed. The way my life seemed to orbit hers. Not equal. Never equal. Support. Replacement. Backup. I wasn't her twin. I was her solution. Created for her. Designed for her survival. The crowd erupted into whispers.
Shocked. Confused.
But I couldn't hear them anymore. Because inside my head, something else was happening. Everything I thought I knew was rearranging itself. Violently. You exposed my DNA? Alina continued softly. That's cute. She stepped closer. So, let's expose yours too. My chest tightened. Because I knew whatever she was about to say next was something I had never prepared for. And for the first time since I stepped onto that stage, I realized something terrifying. This wasn't just my revenge story anymore. It was hers too. And I had just handed her the weapon. She leaned into the microphone,
took a breath,
and said, she didn't rush. That was the worst part.
She took her time.
Like she understood something I had only just realized. That control isn't about what you say. It's about when you say it. She looked at the crowd, then at me. And finally, she spoke. She wasn't just born for me. Pause. She was made for me. The words didn't sound real. Not at first. But the silence that followed made them heavier. More dangerous. She wasn't an accident, Alina continued. Not a miracle. Her eyes locked onto mine. She was a decision. My legs felt lighter, like I wasn't fully inside my body anymore. Because somewhere deep inside, a memory tried to surface. White lights, cold rooms, my mother crying. But I pushed it down. Not now. Not here. She was conceived through a donor program, Alina said calmly. Specifically selected, engineered.
Pause.
To be compatible with me.
Gasps.
Louder this time. Because now, this wasn't just family betrayal. This was something clinical, calculated, unnatural. My father finally moved. Enough, he snapped. But his voice wasn't strong anymore. It cracked. And that crack was everything. Because for years, he had been the one in control. the one who decided what truth looked like. And now, he couldn't even hold a sentence together. Alina didn't even look at him. She gave me what I needed to live, she continued. Cells, tissue, compatibility. Her voice softened slightly. And after that, pause. She was supposed to just exist.
Exist.
Not live. Not matter. Just
Be there.
available. Replaceable.
I felt something inside me shift.
Not break.
Shift.
Because pain had already done its job. And what came after pain was clarity. I lifted my head slowly, met her gaze, and for the first time since she started speaking, I didn't feel overwhelmed. I felt focused.
Good.
Because now I understood the full picture. Not just what they did to me, but what they did to her. Because suddenly, her confidence made sense. Her entitlement. Her obsession with taking my place. She wasn't stealing my life. She was reclaiming what she believed was hers. And that belief was built by them. Carefully. Over years. But here's the thing about beliefs. They're powerful. Until they're challenged. I stepped forward.
Slow.
Deliberate. And this time, when I reached for the microphone,
She didn't stop me.
because she thought she had already won. That was her mistake. I took a breath. Let the silence stretch just enough. Then I spoke. You're right. The words hit her first. Confusion flickering across her face. Because agreement wasn't part of her plan. I was created for you, I continued. Murmurs spread instantly. But not in the way you think. Now the crowd leaned in again. Because contradiction pulls people closer than conflict. I turned slightly. Looked at my parents. Really looked at them. And this time, they didn't look powerful. They looked
Small.
afraid. They didn't just create me to save you, I said softly. I paused. Let the weight of the next words build. They created me because they were already losing you. Alina's expression tightened. That landed. Because it wasn't denial. It was doubt. And doubt is the beginning of collapse. You weren't their miracle, I continued. I stepped closer. They were trying to fix a mistake. Her jaw tensed. What are you talking about? She snapped. There it was. Emotion. Finally. I didn't answer immediately. Because timing is everything. Instead, I reached into my bag one last time and pulled out something neither of them expected. Not a report. Not a file. A recording. Small. Silent. But powerful. My father's face changed instantly.
Because he recognized it. Of course he did.
I held it up slightly. This was recorded 15 years ago, I said. My mother shook her head. No, she whispered. Too late. I pressed play. At first, just static. Then voices. Familiar. Terrifyingly familiar. My parents. Younger. More relaxed. Unaware they were being captured. We didn't have a choice. My mother's voice echoed softly. The crowd leaned in. Because this was real. We pushed the first treatment too far, my father replied.
Treatment.
That word hung in the air. It caused the condition, he added. My breath stopped. Because now, the truth wasn't forming slowly. It was crashing. Violently. You said it was safe, my mother whispered in the recording. I said it was experimental, he corrected. Silence. Then, the line that changed everything. If we don't fix this, we lose her. Her. Alina. Not a victim of fate. A result of them. Of their decisions. Their ambition. Their need to control even biology itself. The recording continued. We can create a match, my father said. Another child. Not just another child, my mother replied softly. A solution. The audio cut, and the silence that followed was absolute, because now there was no story to twist, no perception to manipulate, just truth. Cold, precise, unforgiving. Alina stared at me, not angry, not defensive, just still, because everything she believed had just been rewritten. You, she whispered, but she couldn't finish the sentence, because there was nothing left to say. I stepped closer, close enough that only she could hear me. They didn't choose you, I said quietly. A pause. They needed you. Her eyes widened slightly, because that difference changes everything. Behind us, the crowd erupted. Questions, shock, outrage. But none of it mattered anymore, because the real moment was happening right here, between us. Two people who had just discovered they were never who they thought they were. And for the first time, we weren't enemies. We were consequences. But consequences don't stay quiet forever. She took a step back, then another, and suddenly she smiled. Not broken, not defeated. Something else. Something dangerous. You think this ends here? She said softly. My chest tightened again, because I recognized that tone. It was mine, reflected back at me. She leaned closer. You exposed them, she whispered. A pause. Now, let's see what happens when I expose you. The words hit differently this time, because they weren't a reaction. They were a promise. And before I could respond, she turned back toward the microphone, lifted her chin slightly, and said, she didn't hesitate. That's how I knew this wasn't impulsive. She had something, and she had been waiting. She faced the crowd again, calm, composed, almost relieved. Funny how truth does that. It doesn't always destroy you. Sometimes it frees you. You all just heard a story about how I was created, she said softly. A few people nodded, phones still raised, and how she was created to save me. She gestured toward me. I didn't move, didn't react, because whatever she was about to say, I needed to hear it fully, without interruption, without emotion. But there's one detail she conveniently left out, Alina continued. My stomach tightened, because I hadn't left anything out. At least, I didn't think I had. She said she found my DNA report. Pause. Hidden. Her eyes flicked to mine. And that's true. A beat. But she didn't tell you where she found it. The room leaned in again. That quiet pull of curiosity, tightening around every word. I stayed still. Let her speak. Because silence is how you measure your opponent. She didn't find it in some random file, Alina said. Her voice sharpened slightly. She found it in a locked medical archive. A ripple. Because now, this wasn't just family. This was institutional. controlled, restricted. She accessed records that require clearance, she continued. Then she smiled.
Slow.
Knowing. Clearance she doesn't have. There it was.
The shift.
Subtle, but dangerous. Because now, I wasn't just the victim. I was questionable. The crowd reacted instantly. Whispers changing tone. Less sympathy, more suspicion. I felt it.
Of course I did.
But I didn't rush to defend myself. Because rushed defense sounds like guilt. Instead, I watched her, studied her rhythm. She stepped closer to the edge of the stage. Comfortable now. In fact, she added, the only way she could have accessed those files, pause, is if she was already inside the system. A few people frowned.
Processing.
Connecting. And then she delivered it, which means she turned fully toward me. She didn't just discover the truth. A pause. She was looking for it. The words landed hard. Because intention changes everything. Curiosity is innocent, but searching with purpose, that's different. That's calculated. I felt a few eyes shift, not just toward me, through me, like they were trying to figure out who I really was. Good. Let them wonder. Because confusion is where control begins. Alina took another step. You want to know something even more interesting? She said. Her voice lowered, pulling everyone closer. She didn't disappear for no reason. That hit. Because now, she was touching my timeline. My choices. The parts one had kept hidden. She left, Alina continued, right after gaining access.
True.
But truth, without context, is a weapon. And during that time, she said, she wasn't hiding. My pulse slowed, because now I knew. She was about to cross into something I hadn't expected her to know. She was working. A pause. With the same system she just exposed. The crowd reacted instantly. Because now, this wasn't just family betrayal. This was something bigger. Something structured. Dangerous. I finally moved. Just a step. Just enough. Because timing is everything. She noticed. Of course she did. And she smiled. You didn't think I wouldn't look, did you? She whispered. So she had been searching.
Digging.
Just like me. Interesting. Go on, I said softly, inviting her, letting her think she was in control. Because people reveal more when they feel powerful. She turned back to the microphone. While I was becoming her, she said, I started noticing things. She tapped the side of her head. Patterns. A small pause. Files accessed under her ID from locations she was never in. Murmurs. Encrypted requests. Another pause. Medical overrides. Now the tension shifted again. Because this sounded different. Technical. Serious. Official. She wasn't just a student, Alina said. Her eyes met mine again.
She was part of something.
The room went still, and for the first time, I let a small smile form, because now we were finally at the truth. Not the surface, not the family lies, the real layer, the one I had been protecting, the one she had just exposed. I stepped forward. Not to stop her, but to finish it. Yes, I said calmly. The word cut through everything.
Clear.
Undeniable. I was looking. A ripple. Because confession always hits harder than accusation. And I didn't just find her report. I continued. I looked at the crowd, then back at her. I found all of them. Silence. Because now, it wasn't just about Alina. It was about something larger. Hidden. Systematic. My parents froze again. Worse this time. Because they understood exactly what I meant. Alina's smile faded slightly. Just slightly. Enough. What are you talking about? She asked. And this time, she wasn't performing. She was asking. Good. Because now, we had reached the real game. I tilted my head slightly. You think you were the only one? I said softly. A pause. Letting it sink in. Created, selected, designed. The words echoed. Because now, they weren't about her anymore. They were about something bigger. Something no one in that room was ready for. I stepped closer. Lowered my voice. But the microphone still carried it. To them, I said, we were never daughters. A beat. We were prototypes. The reaction wasn't loud. It was worse. It was quiet. Because some truths don't explode. They settle.
Deep.
Heavy. Irreversible. Alina stared at me. And for the first time, she didn't have a response. Not immediately. Because I had just taken the ground back.
Completely.
But then, slowly, that same dangerous smile returned. And she whispered, just loud enough for me to hear. Then you know what comes next. My breath caught. Because I did. I absolutely did. And I hated that she understood it too. Because if she knew, then everything I had planned was already at risk. She turned back to the crowd, lifted her chin, and this time, her voice carried something new. Not confusion, not fear, power. Ask her, she said calmly. A pause. Ask her what happens to prototypes. Her eyes locked onto mine. When the experiment ends. The room held its breath. And for the first time, I didn't answer immediately. Because the truth, this time, wasn't just dangerous for her. It was dangerous for me. The silence stretched longer than it should have. And people noticed. Because hesitation doesn't look like mystery. It looks like fear. And I couldn't afford that. Not now. Not when everything was finally in the open. Alina didn't move. She didn't need to. Because she had just done something subtle and extremely dangerous. She shifted the burden onto me. Now I was the one holding the next truth. And the longer I stayed quiet, the more power she gained. Smart. Very smart. I inhaled slowly, then stepped forward. Not rushed, not defensive. Controlled. Nothing happens to prototypes, I said calmly. A few people frowned.
Confused.
Because that answer didn't match the tension. Good.
Confusion buys time.
They don't get an ending, I continued. I looked at the crowd. They get replaced. That landed. Because replacement is colder than destruction. More calculated. More real. I turn my head slightly toward my parents. They move on to better versions, I added softly. My father's jaw tightened. My mother closed her eyes for a second. That was enough. because reaction is confirmation. Alina watched me carefully, measuring, recalculating. She wasn't expecting that answer. She wanted something darker, something final. But I gave her something worse. Continuity. Because if we were replaceable, then none of this was special. Not her.
Not me.
Just steps in a process. You're lying, she said quietly. But there was no confidence behind it. Just resistance. I tilted my head. Am I? I asked. Then I reached into my bag again.
Slowly.
Deliberately. Because repetition builds tension. And tension controls attention. This time, I didn't pull out a document. I pulled out a small, plain USB drive. Nothing impressive. Nothing dramatic. But the moment my father saw it, his composure cracked.
Completely.
Where did you get that? He snapped. There it was.
Fear. Raw.
Unfiltered. I didn't answer him. I looked at the dean. Is there a projector? I asked calmly. A pause. Then a nod. Because at this point, no one wanted this to stop. They needed to see how far it went. How deep it went. The screen behind the stage flickered on.
Bright.
Blank. And I walked over. Every step measured. Every movement intentional. Because now, this wasn't just exposure. This was demonstration. I plugged the drive in, clicked once, and stepped aside. At first, nothing. Then, a file opened. A list.
Names. Dates. Codes.
Dozens. No, hundreds. The crowd reacted instantly. Because it wasn't just data. It was a pattern. Repeated. Systematic. Each entry had the same structure. Subject ID. Genetic markers. Compatibility scores. And one line, repeated over and over again. Outcome archived. A chill moved through the room. Because archived doesn't mean saved. It means stored, removed, finished. Alina stepped closer to the screen, her eyes scanning. Faster, faster, until she froze. Because she found it. Her entry, her code, and right below it,
Mine.
side by side, connected, not as sisters, as variables. Her breathing changed. Sharp, unsteady. What is this? She whispered. Not to me. To herself. Because now, this wasn't a story anymore. It was proof. And proof doesn't care about feelings. I walked back toward her. Stopped just beside her. Close enough to feel the shift in her energy. This, I said quietly, is the full project. A pause. The one they never told you about. She shook her head slightly. No, she whispered. But it wasn't denial. It was refusal. Because accepting it meant losing everything. Again. I looked at the screen. Then back at her. You were the first, I said.
A beat.
And you won't be the last. The words settled heavily. Because now, the story had expanded. Beyond us. Beyond family. Into something colder. Larger.
Designed.
The crowd erupted. Not in whispers this time. In voices. Questions. Demands. Because now, this wasn't personal. This was exposure. Institutional. Dangerous. My father stepped forward.
but not toward me.
Toward the screen. Desperate. Turn that off, he shouted. Too loud. Too late. Because the moment you tell people not to look is the moment they have to. Alina turned slowly toward him. Her face,
Completely different now.
not broken, not emotional, empty. And that emptiness was more dangerous than anything before.
You knew, she said.
Not a question. A statement. My mother tried to speak, but no words came out. Because what do you say when your entire life was built on a lie that just collapsed? Alina laughed softly.
Once. Short. Sharp.
Then she looked at me, and for a moment, there was something unexpected there. Not hatred, not rivalry, recognition. Like we had finally reached the same place, the same truth. You didn't just expose me, she said quietly. A pause. You exposed all of us. I nodded slightly. Yes. Because that was always the plan. Not revenge. Not just her. Everything. But then, she said something that I hadn't accounted for. Something that made everything shift again. You shouldn't have done that.
Her voice was calm. Too calm.
And before I could respond, the lights flickered.
Once. Twice.
Then, the screen went black.
Completely. Gasps.
Confusion.
Movement.
I looked at the projector. Then at the USB. Still connected. Still there. But the system
Was gone.
And in that exact moment, my phone vibrated.
Once. I didn't need to check.
I already knew. Because there was only one reason. Everything would shut down this fast. They were watching. The entire time.
And now,
They were responding. Alina looked at me. A slow smile forming again.
told you. She didn't say it.
She didn't have to. Because we both understood. This was never just about us. And whatever came next wasn't something either of us could control anymore. The darkness didn't last long. Just enough to remind everyone how fragile control really is. Then the backup lights came on.
Dim. Cold.
The kind of light that makes everything look exposed. No music. No ceremony. Just tension.
Raw.
People were talking now, not whispering, demanding answers. The dean was on the phone, security moving faster. But none of that mattered. Because I felt it. That shift. The moment when a situation stops being social and becomes something else. Something controlled from outside the room. I pulled my phone out slowly. One message. Unknown number. Disconnect.
Now.
No name. No explanation. But I didn't need one. Because I already knew who they were. Or, at least, who they weren't. Not my parents. Not the university. Something bigger. Something that didn't panic.
Something that acted.
I locked the screen again. Didn't show it. Because information is power. And right now, I needed every advantage. Alina was watching me. Of course she was. Her eyes flicked briefly to my hand. She noticed the phone. She always noticed everything. What did they say? She asked quietly. No accusation. No fear. Just curiosity. That same dangerous curiosity we shared. I slipped the phone back into my bag. Nothing useful, I replied,
A lie.
but a necessary one. Because trust wasn't something we had.
Not yet.
Maybe not ever. Around us, the crowd was breaking into clusters. Some leaving, some staying, but everyone still watching. Because this wasn't over. Not even close. My father stepped toward us again, but slower this time, measured, like he was choosing his next move carefully.
Good.
That meant he was thinking, and thinking people can be predicted. You've done enough, he said. Not loud, not commanding, almost controlled again, trying to recover, trying to rebuild authority. I smiled slightly.
No, I said.
Simple. Final. This is just the beginning. His eyes hardened, because he knew I meant it. Alina crossed her arms slowly, watching both of us now, not taking sides, not aligning,
Calculating.
she was adapting.
Fast.
Faster than I expected, and that made her useful or dangerous. Maybe both. Whatever you think you exposed, my father continued, you don't understand what you've triggered. I tilted my head. I understand enough, I said softly. Then I stepped closer. Close enough that only he could hear. They're already involved. That landed.
Hard.
Because I saw it. That flicker. That moment where control slips just a little. You shouldn't have brought this here, he whispered. I leaned in slightly. You shouldn't have started it. We held eye contact for a second longer. Then I stepped back. Because intimidation isn't about duration. It's about impact. Alina exhaled slowly. So what now? She asked. Not sarcastic. Not mocking.
Genuine.
Because for the first time, we were both outside the plan. And that's where things get unpredictable. I looked at her. Really looked at her. And saw it clearly now. She wasn't my enemy. Not anymore. She was something else. Someone who had been shaped, just like me, by the same hands, the same lies, different roles, same system. We wait, I said quietly. She frowned slightly. For what? I glanced around the room, at the exits, at the security, at the people still recording, then back at her, for them to make their move. As if on cue, the main doors opened, not loudly, not dramatically, just deliberately. And 3 people walked in, not security, not staff, something else. Their presence was different.
Too calm.
Too precise. Like they weren't reacting to chaos, but stepping into a scheduled moment. The crowd noticed immediately, voices lowering again, because instinctively, people can feel authority, even when it's silent. They didn't rush.
Didn't speak.
They just walked forward, straight toward the stage, toward us. My pulse slowed, not faster, slower, because this was the part one had been preparing for, even if I didn't know exactly how it would happen. Alina stepped slightly closer to me, not touching, just closer. Instinct. She felt it too. Friends of yours, she murmured. I shook my head.
No.
A pause. But they know me. The 3 figures stopped at the edge of the stage. One of them stepped forward. A woman, mid-40s, sharp eyes, calm expression, the kind of calm that isn't natural. It's practiced, engineered. She looked at me first, not my parents, not the dean,
Me.
and then she smiled. Small, controlled. You've grown, she said. The words hit strangely. Too familiar. Too personal. Like she wasn't meeting me for the first time. And suddenly, a memory flickered.
A room.
White walls. Observation glass. Someone watching. Always watching. I didn't react. Because recognition is something you never show first. You're interrupting a public event, the dean said nervously. She didn't even look at him. Instead, she kept her eyes on me. You accessed restricted data, she continued calmly. A pause. And then you shared it. Not a question. A statement. I nodded slightly. Yes. No denial. Because denial is useless when they already know. She tilted her head just a little. Studying me, like I was still part of something. Like I never left. And you think this ends in exposure? She asked. I didn't answer. Because this wasn't about what I thought. This was about what she wanted me to say. And I wasn't giving her that. Alina stepped forward slightly. And who exactly are you? She asked. The woman finally looked at her. A brief glance. Evaluating. Then back to me. Interesting. She didn't consider Alina the priority. Not yet. I'm the one who decides what happens next, she said calmly. And just like that, the room shifted again. Because authority doesn't need to be loud.
It just needs to be certain.
She reached into her coat slowly, pulled out a thin folder, and held it up. Since you like revealing things publicly, she said, let's continue. My chest tightened, because I understood immediately. This wasn't damage control. This was escalation. And whatever was inside that folder wasn't meant to protect me or Alina. It was meant to control us. She took a step closer, extended the folder slightly.
Toward me.
Go on, she said softly. Let's see how much you really want the truth. The crowd held its breath. Alina looked at me, and for the first time, there was something new in her eyes. Not rivalry, not calculation, concern. Just a flicker, but enough. I reached out, my fingers brushing the edge of the folder, and in that exact moment, I knew whatever was inside would change everything again. Not just what we knew, but who we were, and whether we would survive what came next. I opened it, and my entire expression finally
broke.
The paper felt heavier than it should have. Like it wasn't just information, but weight. The kind that doesn't sit in your hands. It sinks into your chest. I didn't speak. Didn't move. Just read. Line by line. And for the first time, since this all started, my control slipped. Not visibly.
Not to them.
But inside, something cracked. Because this wasn't about the past. It was about me.
Right now.
Say it, the woman said softly. Her voice didn't push. It guided, like she already knew what the silence meant. I lifted my head slowly, looked at her, then at Alina, then at the crowd. Thousands of eyes, waiting,
hungry.
And for a brief second, I considered lying, twisting it, controlling it the way I had controlled everything else. But this wasn't something you could reshape, because the truth had already been written, not by me, not by her, by them. It's not over, I said quietly. A strange answer, but the only one that fit. The woman smiled slightly, because she understood.
Of course she did.
Of course it's not, she replied. Alina stepped closer. What is it? She asked. No games now. No masks. Just urgency. I looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't see a rival. I saw someone standing exactly where I was, on the edge of something irreversible. They didn't stop with us, I said softly. Her expression tightened. What do you mean? I held the folder tighter. They refined it.
A pause.
Improved it. The crowd stirred again, because even without understanding, they felt it. The scale shifting. The story expanding. Alina shook her head slightly. No, she whispered. But her eyes, they were already searching for confirmation. And I gave it to her. There's a second phase, I said. The woman behind me didn't interrupt. Didn't stop me. Because this was exactly what she wanted. Truth, but controlled. Carefully released. Subjects who aren't just compatible, I continued. My voice steadier now, but adaptable. A ripple moved through the room, because that word, adaptable, felt different. More deliberate. More dangerous. Alina's breathing slowed. Not panic. Focus. And she asked. Just one word. But it carried everything. I exhaled quietly. Then said it. They don't get archived. A pause. They get activated. The silence that followed wasn't confusion. It was instinct. Because people don't always understand details. But they understand tone. And that word, activation, didn't belong in a normal world. Alina stepped even closer now. So what does that mean? She asked. I didn't answer immediately. Because the answer wasn't just information. It was a shift. A line you can't step back from. Instead, I turned the folder slightly. Let her see. Not everything. Just enough. Her eyes moved quickly.
Scanning. Processing.
Then, she stopped. And I saw it. That same moment I had. Recognition. Followed by something sharper.
Fear.
Real fear. Because printed clearly on that page was her name. Not under archived. Not under completed. Under something else. Status. Pending evaluation. She looked up at me. And this time, there was no control left. What is this? She whispered. Before I could answer, the woman finally stepped forward. Close enough that her presence felt deliberate. You are never finished, she said calmly. To Alina. Then her eyes shifted to me. And neither were you. The words didn't echo. They settled.
Deep.
Because this wasn't a threat. It was a reminder of something we had never escaped. Alina shook her head again. No, we're done, she said, her voice rising slightly. We exposed everything. The woman tilted her head, almost amused. You exposed a layer, she corrected. A pause. There are always more. Of course there are. There always are. I closed the folder slowly. because I understood now. What I thought was the end was just visibility, not control. Never control. You came here to contain this, I said. Not a question. A statement. She smiled again. That was one option.
One.
Which meant there were others. Alina stepped back slightly. Option, she repeated. The woman's gaze shifted between us. Measuring. Calculating. Then she said something that changed everything again. Containment or recruitment. The word hung in the air. Strange.
Wrong.
Because recruitment means choice. But nothing about this had ever been a choice. Why would we ever? Alina started, but I interrupted her. Because we already qualify, I said quietly. Her voice stopped. Because she knew. She felt it. Even before fully understanding it. We weren't random. We weren't accidents. We were outcomes. Designed to reach this exact point. The woman nodded slightly.
Finally, she said.
Recognition. Approval. Like I had just passed something. Something I didn't even realize I was being tested on. The crowd around us didn't understand. Not fully. But they felt it. The shift from exposure to something else. Something colder. More controlled. What happens if we say no? Alina asked.
Direct. Brave.
But dangerous. The woman didn't hesitate. They disappear, she said simply. No drama. No threat in her tone. Just fact. And that's what made it worse. Because facts don't negotiate. Silence. Heavy. Unavoidable. I looked at Alina. She looked at me. And for the first time, we weren't thinking about winning, or revenge, or control. We were thinking about survival. And survival changes everything. The woman extended her hand slightly. Not forceful, not urgent, just waiting. For now, she said calmly. A pause. Choose. The entire room held its breath, because even without understanding the details, they knew this moment mattered more than anything that came before. I glanced at the folder again, then at the screen, then at the people, all of them watching, waiting, believing this was the climax. They had no idea. This wasn't the climax. This was the beginning of something much bigger. Something far more dangerous than revenge. I looked back at Alina and quietly asked, "Do you trust me?" A dangerous question. At the worst possible time. She didn't answer immediately.
Of course she didn't.
Because trust isn't built in moments like this. It's tested. And then, slowly, she nodded. Just once.
Small.
But real. And that was enough. I turned back to the woman, stepped forward, and said, I didn't shake her hand. That's what she expected. A clean decision. A visible submission. Something she could define. I gave her something else. I stepped forward, close enough to accept, close enough to refuse. And then I spoke. We choose.
Pause.
To cooperate. Not join. Not submit. Cooperate. A word with edges. The woman's smile didn't change, but her eyes did. Just slightly. Because she heard it. The condition inside the compliance. Alina didn't react, but I felt it. That quiet shift beside me. She understood what I was doing.
Good.
Because this only works if both players stay aware. Cooperation implies terms, the woman said calmly. I nodded. Exactly. A pause. Full transparency on both sides. A ripple moved through the people around us. They didn't understand the details, but they understood negotiation. Power being tested. The woman studied me for a moment, long enough to feel intentional. Then, temporary, she replied. Not agreement, but not refusal. Good enough.
For now.
Alina crossed her arms slightly. And if we don't like what we see, she asked.
Direct. Sharp.
The woman's gaze shifted to her.
Cold.
Measured. Then you won't have to decide anything again. Silence. Because that wasn't a threat. It was structure. And structures don't bend. I stepped forward one last inch, closed the distance, and took the folder from her hand completely. Ownership, not permission. Then I turned, not toward her, toward the crowd. Because none of this mattered if I lost the audience, the narrative, the perception. I lifted the folder slightly. Everyone here came to celebrate a graduation, I said calmly. My voice carried, steady, controlled. But what you witnessed, pause, was something else. Phones lifted again. Recording, streaming. Good. Some of you think this is over, I continued. A small pause. It's not. I let that settle, because truth needs space to breathe. This story doesn't end today, I said. It just became visible. No panic, no urgency, just clarity. Because panic spreads fear. Clarity spreads control. I lowered the folder. And from this point forward,
Pause.
nothing will stay hidden. That line wasn't for the crowd. It was for her, the woman behind me. And she knew it, because when I turned back, she was already watching me differently. Not like a subject, not like a problem, like something else, an asset, or a risk, maybe both. Security finally reached the stage. Too late to stop anything. Right on time to pretend they could. The dean was speaking again, trying to regain order. But it didn't matter. The moment had already escaped. Into phones, into feeds, into places no one could control anymore. Alina stepped beside me. Not behind, not in front. Beside.
Equal. For the first time. She didn't look at me, but she spoke quietly.
So, this is what you planned? I shook my head slightly.
No.
A small pause. This is what I adapted to. She let out a quiet breath. Almost a laugh. Of course you did. We stood there for a second. Not as enemies. Not as sisters. Something else. Something undefined. And maybe that was better, because definitions had always been the problem. The woman turned to leave.
Just like that.
No dramatic exit. No final warning. Because people like her don't need endings. They just move to the next phase. But before she stepped off the stage, she stopped. Just for a moment. And said without turning, "You pass." 2 words. Quiet, but heavy. I didn't respond, because passing a test means there's another one coming. And I wasn't interested in celebrating too early.
The crowd slowly started breaking apart. Not in excitement, in confusion, in tension, because they had witnessed something they couldn't fully understand, but would never forget. I looked down at the folder in my hands, then at the black screen behind us, then at Alina. "Whatever comes next," I said softly. "We don't play their roles." She nodded.
Slow, certain.
"We write our own." For once, I believed her, not because I trusted her completely, but because now we both knew the truth. And truth changes the game.
Completely.
I turned away from the stage, not rushing, not looking back, because power is knowing when to leave. And behind me, the world we just broke open was already trying to rebuild itself. But it wouldn't be the same.
It couldn't be.
Because now it had seen us, and we had seen it. And once that happens, there's no going back. Only forward. Into something darker. Something bigger. Something we weren't created for. But were never meant to escape either. And this time, we wouldn't be prototypes. We'd be the ones rewriting the system.
Silently. Patiently.
I tightened my grip on the folder and smiled, just a little, because the real story had just begun. I didn't shake her hand. That's what she expected. A clean decision, a visible submission, something she could define. I gave her something else. I stepped forward, close enough to accept, close enough to refuse. And then I spoke. We choose.
Pause.
To cooperate. Not join. Not submit. Cooperate. A word with edges. The woman's smile didn't change, but her eyes did. Just slightly. Because she heard it. The condition inside the compliance. Alina didn't react, but I felt it. That quiet shift beside me. She understood what I was doing.
Good.
Because this only works if both players stay aware. Cooperation implies terms, the woman said calmly. I nodded. Exactly. A pause. Full transparency on both sides. A ripple moved through the people around us. They didn't understand the details, but they understood negotiation. Power being tested. The woman studied me for a moment, long enough to feel intentional. Then, temporary, she replied. Not agreement, but not refusal. Good enough.
For now.
Alina crossed her arms slightly. And if we don't like what we see, she asked.
Direct. Sharp.
The woman's gaze shifted to her.
Cold.
Measured. Then you won't have to decide anything again. Silence. Because that wasn't a threat. It was structure. And structures don't bend. I stepped forward one last inch, closed the distance, and took the folder from her hand completely. Ownership, not permission. Then I turned, not toward her, toward the crowd. Because none of this mattered if I lost the audience, the narrative, the perception. I lifted the folder slightly. Everyone here came to celebrate a graduation, I said calmly. My voice carried, steady, controlled. But what you witnessed, pause, was something else. Phones lifted again. Recording, streaming. Good. Some of you think this is over, I continued. A small pause. It's not. I let that settle, because truth needs space to breathe. This story doesn't end today, I said. It just became visible. No panic. No urgency. Just clarity. Because panic spreads fear. Clarity spreads control. I lowered the folder. And from this point forward, pause. Nothing will stay hidden. That line wasn't for the crowd. It was for her. The woman behind me. And she knew it. Because when I turned back, she was already watching me differently. Not like a subject. Not like a problem. Like something else. An asset. Or a risk. Maybe both. Security finally reached the stage. Too late to stop anything. Right on time to pretend they could. The dean was speaking again, trying to regain order. But it didn't matter. The moment had already escaped. Into phones. Into feeds. Into places no one could control anymore. Alina stepped beside me. Not behind. Not in front. Beside. Equal. For the first time. She didn't look at me. But she spoke quietly. So, this is what you planned? I shook my head slightly. No. A small pause. This is what I adapted to. She let out a quiet breath. Almost a laugh. Of course you did. We stood there for a second. Not as enemies. Not as sisters. Something else. Something undefined. And maybe that was better. Because definitions had always been the problem. The woman turned to leave. Just like that. No dramatic exit. No final warning. Because people like her don't need endings. They just move to the next phase. But before she stepped off the stage, she stopped. Just for a moment. And said without turning, "You pass." 2 words. Quiet. But heavy. I didn't respond. Because passing a test means there's another one coming. And I wasn't interested in celebrating too early. The crowd slowly started breaking apart. Not in excitement. In confusion. In tension. Because they had witnessed something they couldn't fully understand, but would never forget. I looked down at the folder in my hands. Then at the black screen behind us. Then at Alina. "Whatever comes next," I said softly. "We don't play their roles." She nodded. Slow. Certain. "We write our own." For once, I believed her. Not because I trusted her completely, but because now we both knew the truth. And truth changes the game. Completely. I turned away from the stage. Not rushing. Not looking back. Because power is knowing when to leave. And behind me, the world we just broke open was already trying to rebuild itself. But it wouldn't be the same. It couldn't be. Because now it had seen us. And we had seen it. And once that happens, there's no going back. Only forward. Into something darker. Something bigger. Something we weren't created for. But were never meant to escape either. And this time, we wouldn't be prototypes. We'd be the ones rewriting the system. Silently. Patiently. I tightened my grip on the folder. And smiled. Just a little. Because the real story had just begun.